I will not run for Speaker again. I'll have the conference pick somebody else.
Kevin McCarthy, no longer Speaker of the House. Who's up next? We'll find out soon enough. Coming up today, Congressman Matt Rosendale joins us at 3:30. He voted to oust Kevin McCarthy. At 4 o'clock, we speak to Morgan Ortagus about a pressing story that is not getting enough attention in the media on the ways in which the Biden and Obama administrations have been infiltrated by an Iranian espionage ring. It is so important. Morgan talks about that with us at 4 o'clock. And then at 5:30, another one of those congressmen who voted out Kevin McCarthy, Bob Good of Virginia, joins us. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. So much panic. Have you noticed? So much panic this week among all sorts of people, but on the right specifically, over this fight over Kevin McCarthy and whether or not he should be ousted at all, and why are you doing this, and don't do this, and you're a bad person if you support this, and on and on and on. And, you know, my thinking throughout this entire saga, and I vocalized it in great detail yesterday, and I'll tell you again a little bit today, is that whenever you're faced with this type of chaos, the lesson that history has demonstrated to us is that you need to keep your feet planted, and you need to think clearly, and you need to tune out all of the screaming, don't you? Because if you're going to come up with something that is good for the country, it's not going to be done vis-a-vis emotional blackmail. It's not going to be done with somebody screaming in your face. It's not going to be done with somebody telling you you're a bad person if you choose a different path. That's not how these things work. And where did I get this experience from? And it's not just me, it's all of us to some extent, varying extents. How many times have we been through this? Just since 2020. The George Floyd riots. Do you remember the moral blackmail that was being wielded all across the country during that time? That unless you put a black square on your Instagram, you were a bad person? Do you remember all of this? I mean, we've all lived through this crap. If you're old enough to understand the words that are coming out of my mouth right now, you're old enough to having lived through all of this. People having their lives destroyed because they thought that maybe we shouldn't get rid of cops entirely? That maybe we should look at the data? Do you remember that? Bringing up the data during the George Floyd riots. Hey, wait a second. How many unarmed black people are actually killed by the cops on an annual basis? 2019, 20. 20 people. It's not a genocide, despite what the media is insisting. Why were those 20 killed? What happened? It's worth looking at the details, including whether or not abuse is being committed, isn't it? But let's be honest about what's going on. Thousands upon thousands of black people being killed every year. Homicide, mostly by black perpetrators. No conversation about that. In fact, that was forbidden in 2020. If you brought that up, your life was destroyed. Okay. I mean, to the point that Mitt Romney was marching in the freaking streets of Washington, D.C., acting like he was the world's greatest Black Lives Matter supporter. It was also ridiculous, wearing a mask. Speaking of that, COVID. What kind of moral blackmail was wielded during COVID? People telling you were a bad person if you thought you shouldn't have to wear a mask outdoors. People were so beaten into submission, they were wearing masks on bicycles, but not helmets. Do you remember this? Observational studies being done at colleges. They would watch the students drive by on their little bicycles. Bring, bring. They would pass by. And they would wear masks outdoors, no helmets. That's very safe. It's senseless. Ukraine. We've been dealing with this for years now. Ukraine. Asking any questions about the way the money is spent. Asking for accountability on behalf of the American people. Asking to make sure that one of, if not the most corrupt country on earth doesn't actually steal all the money. Asking things like that. You're not patriotic. What are you on the side of Hitler? What are you, a Putin apologist? You were the goal was to suffocate those types of deeply reasonable, sober questions. The first McCarthy speaker fight, it seemed like the entirety of the establishment and plus a bunch more, everybody was like, why would you dare challenge the rise of Kevin McCarthy? Who do you think you are? Why are you doing this? Why, Republican congressman, are you bringing this to 15 rounds of votes? And over the course of time, what did they do? Well, we learned what they did. They actually got McCarthy to make a number of very good concessions in order to rise to become speaker in the first place. And if you could get over your emotional hysterics for a moment and have some sobriety about that, you would detect actually what came of that was a good thing. Holding him to account. And now we ultimately we see the fruit of that effort. McCarthy, there's no question, McCarthy did a number of good things during his tenure as Speaker, I will say. I like the effort to hold a corrupt Biden administration accountable. I like launching all of the inquiries and the subpoenas and getting all of the information. That's ideal. Did he talk a big game and then not deliver on things? Well, yeah, for sure. An example of that was, remember when he went to the border and he said, Alejandro Mayorkas, either you resign or we will consider impeaching you. Remember that? What happened to that? I guess they were doing a lot of considering. There was never an impeachment launched or even an impeachment inquiry launched on this guy. And for those of you who've been listening to this program for a while, you know that I've been concerned about the nature of this impeachment inquiry. What is actually meaningfully different about it from the Oversight Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, the Judiciary Committee, digging in to these Biden family scandals? What changes by Kevin McCarthy simply waving his hand and saying we have an impeachment inquiry now? What was actually fundamentally different? And the thing they kept telling you was, well, this gives us the apex of investigative power now, right? But boy, that came at an awfully convenient time. It came at a time where Kevin McCarthy had failed to marshal the support in Congress to get 12 spending bills done. So he knew he needed his base, Republicans, conservative voters across the country, to feel like they had something from him. So he threw out, okay, it's an impeachment inquiry now. It's an impeachment inquiry. We've elevated, we've escalated this as we go after Biden. Is it meaningfully escalated? Have they really gotten some new additional powers? I keep asking about this. I'm not convinced that they have. And really, I think if the whole idea is it's going to be up to the courts, then it really comes down to, do we have a left-wing judge or somebody who actually believes in the rule of law? I woke up this morning feeling a sense of calm about yesterday's events. It was, like I said, it was chaotic, of course. But I felt good about it. I felt really good about it, actually. Because I think the possibilities in terms of what happens next are all good for the country. They're all good for us. Now, one of the reasons I think that is because Democrats don't actually get to say who the next speaker is. I know that there's a lot of fear-mongering around that. There has been. But they're not going to get to pick the next Speaker of the House. They just don't. They don't have the numbers. Additionally, whoever that next person is, it will not be Kevin McCarthy. Now, that is a credit to McCarthy in a remarkable moment last night, decided he will not run for Speaker again. And so, to the extent that anyone had on the right, anybody who believes in the goodness of this country and wants to see it succeed, if you had sweat on your brow last night, you could wipe it away when McCarthy announced that he's not running for Speaker. And why does this matter? Well, it matters in this sense. Yesterday, remember, we had Congressman Troy Nehls on, and he had voted to keep McCarthy. And he was convinced that McCarthy may very well become Speaker again after wrangling some more support, perhaps, from conservatives or getting Democrats to vote present. But as I said yesterday when that congressman brought that up, I said, well, wait a second. If you get Democrats to vote present, they're not going to do that for free. Why would Democrats do anything that would be obviously helpful to McCarthy for free? They wouldn't. They would expect something from him. He would have to give them something for that, whether it's a policy priority or not to pursue something that conservatives want, right? So that would be a bad thing. That would have been a negative outcome to all of this. But that's not going to occur now. As I played at the outset, this is McCarthy last night.
I will not run for Speaker again. I'll have the conference pick somebody else.
So McCarthy's out. Interestingly, in that statement last night, he did reveal some things that he had never said in public before. And that includes that he had some sort of understanding with Nancy Pelosi that Pelosi was going to fight to protect McCarthy. Now, in case you're wondering, Pelosi lied. Pelosi lied about that. If she actually had made a promise like that, she could have been the one person in the Democrat Party who came out yesterday and said, I'm going to stick with McCarthy here. Here's what McCarthy claimed yesterday.
Interesting, it was in this room after we had won the majority, I hadn't become speaker last, and Nancy Pelosi came to me. She was speaker at the time on the way out. And I told her I was having issues with getting enough votes. And she said, what's the problem? I said, they want this one person can rule you out. She was the only speaker to have changed that rule. I had the power to call the vote on her, but I never would. I lost some votes because of it. And she said, just give it to him. I'll always back you up. I made the same offer to Boehner and same thing to Paul, because I believe in the institution. I think today was a political decision by the Democrats. And I think the things they have done in the past hurt the institution. When they just started removing people from committee, and they just started doing the other things. And my fear is the institution fell today.
Okay, so there's McCarthy saying, my lifeline was Nancy Pelosi. I thought she was going to save me. And she didn't save me. She lied to me. Isn't that sad? Well, yeah, it's sad. Why did you believe Nancy Pelosi? Why would you rest your speakership on the word of a well-established liar? That woman is a serpent. She would, in what circumstance would she actually save you? Unless it involved you selling out the country hardcore. That's insane. And by the way, I hate to say it for McCarthy, but it's true. It ratifies the idea that he should be removed as speaker. You're relying on Nancy Pelosi for your power? It's just remarkable. Now, I guess because Pelosi reneged on her promise to save McCarthy, all of the McCarthy loyalists are now taking it out on Pelosi world all of a sudden. And all the Democrats are upset about this. The Republican establishment has evicted a couple of top Democrats from their plush offices overnight. And Pelosi's not even here on the East Coast right now. She's on the West Coast for Feinstein's funeral, they claim. Acting Speaker Patrick McHenry orders Pelosi to pack up her things, vacate Capitol hideaway office. Politico reports. McHenry ordered Pelosi to move out in an email sent hours after 8 Republicans voted to remove House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, according to Politico. Quote, please vacate the space tomorrow. The room will be rekeyed. An email from the House Administration Committee to Pelosi's staff said. McHenry, who serves as the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, was McCarthy's first choice to serve as Speaker pro temp in the event that he was forced out. Steny Hoyer, additionally, has been kicked out of his Capitol hideaway. According to Jake Sherman, Republicans are taking revenge for Democrats voting with Matt Gaetz to boot Speaker McCarthy from the speakership. Expect more of this, Republican sources tell us. So, what's going on here? Now, on MSNBC, they think the biggest scandal of the day is that Nancy Pelosi is being forced to move offices. Here's Andrea Mitchell defending the honor of the serpent.
Let me ask you about the retaliatory action that was taken within an hour or so.
She's talking to Brendan Buck, a former communications guy for Boehner and Paul Ryan.
Taking away the ceremonial rooms of Nancy Pelosi. So speakers need offices in the Capitol, and thereby, I think Pelosi let John Boehner.
Well, Boehner left, but Denny Hastert had an office in the Capitol for a long time.
And also let Paul Ryan keep offices for a while. I'm not sure which happened, but she did not take.
She has no idea what she's talking about.
The rooms away, and did that in the past.
Well, Boehner and Ryan were both gone sort of immediately after they left the speakership, so they didn't need any space. I will confess a maybe unpopular opinion. I don't have any problem with Patrick McHenry taking away an office space from Nancy Pelosi. They just basically worked with Matt Gaetz to construct a coup of the Republican leadership.
The fact is that they changed the locks while she was in San Francisco and couldn't.
I don't think that when you participate in a coup of the Republican leadership that you should expect any professional courtesy at this point. I think any collegiality goes out the door at that point. So I know that may be unpopular, but I have absolutely no problem with that.
Yeah, I have no problem with that either. Of course, get her butt. Why did she have that office to begin with? Get her out of there. What has she done that's been so great for the country that she deserves gigantic palatial ceremonial offices about how great she is? Whose side are you on if that's what you're arranging? And I like how they only punish her now, not because of what she did to the country, but because of what she did to their friend, Kevin McCarthy. Oh, this is what you get. It is so insane, isn't it? And these Democrats who, as Brendan Buck just pointed out, went with Matt Gaetz and the Republicans. This is going to blow up in their faces, the Democrats, that is. This is, they were probably just as surprised as so many were that McCarthy announced last night he's not running for Speaker. Now they are stuck up a creek without a paddle, these Democrats. What comes next? Fascinating. We'll talk about some of the people who are throwing their hat in the rings right now, and what do we think about these guys? It's all ahead, including Matt Rosendale. Yeah, on that issue, Jim Jordan and Steve Scalise have now thrown their hat into the ring to become the next Speaker of the House. Both men supported Kevin McCarthy, both when he was elected initially and in this latest fight. But now they're stepping out and saying, okay, if not Kevin, how about me? How about me? And so this is a lot for conservatives to consider. Steve Scalise put out a letter today, a Dear Colleague letter asking for their support for him for Speaker. We'll know more next week when the vote actually takes place. In the letter, he does point to the destruction of our country under Joe Biden. The leadership has just been awful. Americans can't afford their daily expenses. The American dream is getting further out of reach. Our debt is crippling. It will cripple our grandchildren. Our border is wide open. These are all the right things to say. Much of the letter does reference when he was shot in 2017, and he says that he was given a second chance for a reason, and he'd like to use that essentially to become Speaker of the House and to serve the country in a new way. Meanwhile, Jim Jordan, in his letter, boy, he really goes after the weaponization of the federal government today. He talks about how the Biden administration has tried to silence Americans on the internet, targeting parents at school board meetings, going after pro-life Catholics as threats, federal law enforcement having two standards of justice in the United States, the unbelievable amount of money the federal government is spending. So I'd say Jordan's letter, spot on in terms of identifying the problems here. Also, another big divider between these two men is Ukraine funding. Scalise, much more likely to vote for a piece of legislation that says, yeah, keep giving Ukraine cash. They did that last week. Scalise did. Jordan, he voted no on that. That is a meaningful difference between the two men. We'll keep talking about this. Congressman Matt Rosendale joins us next. We'll talk about his decision to oust McCarthy yesterday. Good afternoon to you. 3:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Morgan Ortagus talks to us at 4 o'clock about the Iranian influence operation inside the last two Democrat administrations. A huge story. Deserves way more attention. We're going to give it that today at 4 o'clock with Morgan. And then at 5:30, Congressman Bob Good of Virginia joins us, one of 8 Republican congressmen to vote out the House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. Now Republicans have to choose a new speaker. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. One of the others among those 8 is my next guest, Congressman representing Montana's 2nd Congressional District, Matt Rosendale, joins us now. Congressman, good to have you back with us, sir.
Vince, always good to be on with you.
Sir, take us through why you decided yesterday to oust Kevin McCarthy.
This has been brewing for a while, honestly. Look, everybody knows that his ascension to the speaker's position was tumultuous, and there was several of us that reserved ever voting for him because we just felt that he was not a true leader, that he was not trustworthy. But he was elected, and we wanted him to be successful because that success would lead to success for the American people. And so we worked really hard. We worked, and we were able to pass a very conservative agenda because a small group of us held hard to our guns and dragged the conference over to the right. And we were able to pass H.R. 1, the domestic energy legislation. H.R. 2, what I'm told is the most comprehensive and conservative southern border and immigration policy that has ever been passed. The National Defense Act, NDAA, most conservative ever being passed with only Republican votes. The problem and the failure that Kevin McCarthy had was that when it came to the fiscal end of things, he failed miserably. And he didn't just fail, he misled, okay, the conference. And so two real big inflection points. Number one, the Budget Act of 1974 calls for the 12 appropriation bills that we fund government with to be passed by the House by June 30. So start clicking the calendar on that as we begin the year. And then we also had this big budget ceiling debate. We go through the budget ceiling debate, okay, debt ceiling debate, which is basically the line of credit that the federal government has. And I worked very hard. A lot of my colleagues worked very hard to bring all the parties together and craft a document that raised the debt ceiling, $1.5 trillion, or until March the 11th of next year. It froze spending at fiscal 22 levels because we thought that was plenty high enough, but also clawed back the unspent funds from COVID and from new Green Deal provisions that the Biden administration had passed. We were able to secure 218 Republican votes for that legislation, Vince, and sent it over to the Senate. And before the ink was dry, Kevin McCarthy started negotiating a separate deal with Joe Biden. And when he completed that deal, the debt ceiling was raised until January of 25 with no dollar amount affixed to it, which basically means that he gave them a blank check looking at about $4 trillion in additional spending. None of the clawbacks were there. None of the provisions were there. And to demonstrate how tilted this was towards the Democrats, when he passed that bill out of the House, 169 Democrats supported it, and only 145 Republicans did. Then we fast forward, we get to June 30th. We don't have the appropriation bills. July 30, we don't get them. The Appropriations Committee had completed most of their work. He doesn't bring them to the floor. August 30 comes. Finally, a small group of us again get together. We force Kevin McCarthy to bring those bills to the floor because we are facing the government shutdown or a CR. And so we were able to pass 3 of those 4 bills: DOD, Homeland Security, State and Foreign and Operations. Anyway, he forces the Republican conference and Congress into a situation where they have to either fund government with a continuing resolution or have what I call a slowdown. And so many of us were opposed to that. When he passed that resolution, there were 209 Democrats that supported it and only 125 Republicans. Again, if you are passing major pieces of legislation that affect the finances of this country, and you're relying upon more Democrats to pass that legislation than you are Republicans, who are you working for? And as that legislation was being passed, we received message from President Biden that there was another provision would soon be looking at, that Kevin McCarthy agreed to attach southern border security to Ukraine funding. And that's it. We're done. We're done of the misleading. We're done of the mistruths, and it was time for him to be removed.
Were you surprised to hear yesterday Kevin McCarthy say 2 things? One, that he's not going to run for Speaker again. I think that came as a surprise to a lot of people. And 2, that he said he had some sort of secret deal with Pelosi, that Pelosi would rescue him if he had ever run into a motion to vacate.
I don't doubt the second part of that statement, and that's why I think that he was so arrogant as he approached this and said, "Bring it on, bring it on." And so when we did, I think by that morning he recognized that no, Hakeem came out and said, you don't have a deal with me, and I'm in charge of this group now, and you're going to have to bail yourself out. I think that morning he knew that he was in major trouble.
It's a remarkable. So but you didn't know that he was going to drop out, right? I mean, so when you move forward on voting on this and to oust Kevin McCarthy, you did it without knowing what came next, correct? Like all you knew was that you were removing McCarthy.
No, I didn't. We did not know. I did not know what the final outcome. I don't know that anybody, really knows the final outcome up here until the votes are all calculated. But I will tell you this: I find it very telling that some other people knew, because before midnight last night, Vince, what was there, 5 people that have announced that they're going to run for Speaker, which then goes to the other argument that we were making in January when everybody said, well, who then? Well, who then? And we all kept saying, nobody is going to signal or raise their hand and say that they're running for Speaker until the king's been removed, because they fear for retribution.
Do you think Democrats made a mistake voting with you yesterday? I realize that they voted and achieved the goal that you wanted, which is to remove Kevin McCarthy. But from where I'm sitting, I kind of think that they believed McCarthy would return to that seat, and the only way that that would occur would be with Democrats, voting present or something, and in exchange for some sort of concessions from McCarthy. Now it looks like conservatives are going to get to really have carte blanche here, and McCarthy's not even a part of this equation. Did Democrats make a mistake yesterday?
They may have made a miscalculation. I don't know, but I'll tell you what, I absolutely, with all my heart, believe that the country's in better shape this afternoon than it was yesterday morning. I truly believe that. We cannot have someone who is not trustworthy leading the Republican conference. We have the ability right now with this small majority to move the conference over to the right, and we've demonstrated that we are doing just that. And if we have a strong leader that we all can rely upon, that we can count on his word, that has a vision, that shares the vision that we do, of getting our fiscal house in order and saving the country from financial ruin, we can close the 118th Congress out very strong.
So, as you mentioned, there's only a 45-day continuing resolution in effect right now, which means that the government is currently funded up until just before Thanksgiving. At the moment, the House is not in session. The now Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry, announced yesterday that everything will come back next week, Tuesday. That's when you're apparently going to hear from some of these candidates who would like to become the next Speaker of the House. Are we wasting precious time by waiting for that vote?
We are. We should be still meeting with and he has the ability to certainly direct this as Speaker pro tem. We should have the Rules Committee meeting right now, and the Appropriation Committee. There's 2 appropriation committees that still have some work to do. They should be continuing this work. What I am pleased about is, of the $6.9 trillion that's proposed to spend next fiscal year, Vince, what is left to appropriate is about $400 billion. So in the scheme of things, there's not that much work left. Most of the spending is mandatory, as you know. The discretionary funding, the big bills have been taken care of. The Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, the military construction, VA, that's already been passed. Okay, so $400 billion. There's 8 bills, but it's $400 billion. There is no reason that we can't knock that out. We did 4 of the biggest bills that we have to address last week alone. Let's get back to work and knock the rest of this out.
Right. Why would you need a week delay before you could begin the process of picking a speaker? Why would that delay even occur?
Can't answer that. I really can't answer that.
Well, it seems to me, Congressman, that money is a big thing here too. Because yesterday I noticed that there were some attacks on Matt Gaetz about he's fundraising, and he responded with I thought a pretty rousing floor speech. Is like, look, I'm fundraising to the extent I'm fundraising is with small dollar donors. I'm just emailing people and asking them for support. People are pitching in $20, $30, $40. I'm not owned by any of these lobbyists, he said. I'm not owned by these special interests. And that to me seemed like a pretty direct shot at Kevin McCarthy. McCarthy, as I think a lot of people realize, and perhaps don't, is a guy who wields a tremendous amount of money. All of the money, much of the money in the House flows to all these Republican candidates through Kevin McCarthy. He makes decisions about where to spend and who to help and how they get elected and reelected. And maybe this week is a pause for donors to have their say in who becomes the next speaker. Is that possible?
Money runs a lot of this town, Vince. It's absolutely disgraceful. I can tell you, look at my FEC sheet, and you will see not a lot of PAC money coming into Matt Rosendale. And then you'll see that the Senate, unfortunately, functions the same way. There's a lot of people that will not get sideways with Mitch McConnell because he swings a very large bank account, not a big stick. He swings a big bank account,
right?
And people are just reluctant to try and go up against that. I will tell you right now, most of those folks have dedicated politics to their career. And I had a career. I had a successful career. I was blessed by God in real estate before I ever did this. And I put my children through school. They're adults now. And then I began my public service. So that this is not my career. What this is public service. So I'm not dependent upon that. So my votes are not tainted by what will and will not keep me here. Yeah. And unfortunately, that is a very, very small minority of the folks serving.
Congressman Matt Rosendale, a couple of people have thrown their hat into the rings, as you mentioned, already to become the next speaker. Among them are Jim Jordan and Steve Scalise. Could you envision yourself supporting any of them? Is there somebody who you'd prefer?
What I will tell you is I'm very glad that we are having this forum on Tuesday so that everyone who is interested in becoming the next speaker is actually going to be able to come out and speak and demonstrate their leadership skills, share their vision with us, and we know them well enough that we will be able to determine if they're going to be trustworthy enough, which I consider the most important quality, to serve us all and represent us. I want to know that when someone makes an agreement with us in the conference, in confidence, that when they leave the room and they negotiate with Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, or Joe Biden, that they do not disregard the commitments they've made to the conference.
Lastly, Congressman Rosendale, I do want to ask you about a headline involving you today because Tom Cotton is attacking you, the senator, on Twitter, or X they call it now. It's related to something that I guess you had said in the past, that you, ahead of the 2022 midterms, that you were praying for a small majority for Republicans. I assume that means so that conservatives could have more sway within the Congress. But I'll let you explain yourself. But Tom Cotton is attacking you for this, suggesting that you were instead praying for Democrats to win, and that means you shouldn't be anywhere near the Senate. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think you're going to hear a lot of people say a lot of things because of heated tempers and tensions because of what's taking place now. But I will tell you that I did want a small majority for the Republicans because I knew that there was going to be a small group of conservatives that were going to be able to pass that conservative agenda and move. It would force the entire conference to move to the right. And guess what, Vince? I was spot on. I was fortunate enough to have those prayers answered, and guess what? It has produced much, much fruit, and the only time that we have lost that conservative agenda is when Kevin McCarthy has gone around behind us and undone it with the Democrat votes.
Congressman Matt Rosendale joining us today. As always, thank you, sir. Really appreciate your time. Hello, Brian.
Yes. Hey, Vince. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
You woke up. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, just fine.
Okay. Yeah. You woke up feeling exactly correct. The days of the comedy and squishy go along to get along uniparty Republicans is over. We are in a knife fight with the most radical leftists since Mao for the very survival of this republic. And just the fact that McCarthy was actually willing to trust the word of Nancy Pelosi is absolutely the most disqualifying point.
Yeah, he had a secret deal with her. She was going to save him. She said, don't you worry. Let them change it to a single vote motion to vacate. If they do, I will be here to save you. And guess what happened yesterday? She wasn't there. She abandoned him in a second. And he took her word. He believed her. Of all people, when has she done anything good for anyone? It's amazing. Brian, thank you. Coming up, Morgan Ortagus will be with us. We talk Iran with her and the influence that they're wielding inside of the Biden administration. This is a scandal for the ages. Stay with us.